Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here at my next Star Wars Rebels episode review. This one's going to be for Season 4, Episode 1 and 2, because that's the way they're doing the episodes this season, and 2 at a time it seems like. This is Heroes of Mandalore, Part 1 and 2. And yeah, for the season opener I thought it was a pretty effective 2 episodes to continue on the Mandalore stuff from the first, from last season. Continue on Sabine's arc and just the general focus on Mandalore. I don't think it was like perfect, and I think ultimately there's a few problems with it, but overall I did enjoy it, and what they've done with this arc in terms of making it feel important. I just felt like a few little things towards the end kind of made me a little bit confused about what they were really going for, because the end of these episodes is Sabine passes the Darksaber to Bo-Katan. Bo-Katan is now the leader of the United Mandalorians, basically. I felt like the entire episode was setting up that Sabine was actually meant to be that leader herself. Because initially in the first episode, when Bo arrived, she refused the Darksaber, kind of saying that, oh, someone else has to do it, it's not me you're looking for. And then I felt like the entire arc of these 2 episodes was Sabine showing herself to be that leader. Especially because Bo, there's literally a scene where Sabine is planning out the mission, and Bo basically says that I feel like I'm kind of being led by her. She makes me feel calm before the mission, and she's commanding. So it was such a weird shift in a way when they suddenly turn around and Sabine hands the saber to her, and it's like, it has to be you. It was always you. I get to a degree that they kind of did a little bit to kind of be maybe Sabine is still a bit too young to still be the leader. Maybe in the future she will be. In that the whole scene of her, I suppose, torturing Saxon, and Bo kind of having to be the one to kind of convince her not to kill him for revenge. Maybe it was meant to show that she lacked the maturity to be leader, but I suppose that was just the confusing thing with the episode of we've now left this season, or at least this Mandalore plot for now, with Sabine in this really weird position of okay, so she's no longer kind of separate and off with the Mandalorians now. They're kind of back in play. She's kind of back in play, so I assume she's free now to be part of the Ghost Crew again. And Bo can kind of take up the Sabine role within the Mandalorians, and will maybe get their involvement within Rebel affairs kind of coming up later on in the season. It just was a little bit misplanned in terms of oh, this is the amazing effect we're going to have, but then it almost felt like, oh, Bo-Katan's the leader. I thought it was meant to be Sabine. Okay. But yeah, there's some good moments. We obviously got to introduce to Sabine's father. And it was interesting to see that he's kind of the artist, so that's where the art side kind of comes from. Though he does kind of make the kind of joke about, the creativity comes from her mother with the creative ways of killing people and just that unique dynamic. We got more information, of course, on Sabine and what exactly this weapon was that she made. And it was interesting in that it's a weapon that specifically targets armor based off what it's made from, and basically heats it up and vaporizes whoever is inside the armor. It led to, I thought, what was a very disappointing cliffhanger for the first episode, in that they make it seem really, really dark. This weapon has been fired, Sabine's brother and mother have just been killed. Immediately you start the second part, and because there wasn't a week break between episodes, it was just a minute between, they're dead and, oh, here they are, they walked out. We were on the edge of the blast, we didn't get caught. It just felt like a very kind of manufactured way to add intensity into it. I like that ultimately they made a big deal about it, that it was Sabine making this weapon and having it target Mandalorian armor specifically was this betrayal of the culture of Mandalore, and Bo and all the others were very angry at Sabine for doing this in the first place. It did lead me to I suppose a slightly confusing thing of just okay, going back to earlier seasons when they revealed that Sabine was in the academy, was this at a time when Mandalore was loyal to the Empire? So I think she says it here that she was at the time loyal to the Empire. She felt that that was the right direction to go in, And so the second she realized that the Empire was at fault and they shouldn't use these type of things, she turned around, and that's when she became a rebel. I felt like I suppose over the course of the episode should have made that a little bit clearer about her backstory, and I think showing a flashback episode of her leaving the academy would have been probably the better thing to do, rather than just telling us about it and kind of having this big arc here be very important in relation to that. But obviously by the end she turns it on the Stormtrooper armor, which I wish they'd explained a little bit of kind of why she was able to do that. In that they did mention like the material that partly what the Mandalorian armor is made out of, but then they didn't explain why she could suddenly shift it to the Stormtrooper armor, which seems to be just made of like some sort of a plastic type thing. One of your fancy Star Wars plastics that's armor, but still like kind of plastics type thing nonetheless. That said, I think this is the universe that basically calls it like plasteel or something like that. So like it's probably some sort of metal. That's why like an arc type thing can affect it. Still, I thought it was overall quite interesting. I suppose the only other thing with the weapon is just I didn't quite like how they debuted it as like it vaporizes people, and then most of the use in the episode was at like low power just to shock people, to keep them down. It very much kind of highlighted how limited they were with regards to like being like violent with regards to this stuff, but it didn't take too much away from the episode. The final scenes were quite intense, with the big battle going on in the kind of the bay of the ship, as like Ezra and Kanan went on the data scavenging mission, and Sabine went to destroy the weapon. It all came together quite kind of nicely towards the end, and ultimately all the key characters survived. Mandalore is now kind of united behind Bo-Katan, so it leaves them in a good position. They just need to, I suppose, finish this arc off effectively and really establish what's happening here. I did find the scene with Thrawn very interesting. I think in part because since in the gap between season 3 and 4, just recently I did read the Thrawn novel, which obviously is kind of the origins of Rebels Thrawn. And I thought it was a brilliant novel. I highly recommend anyone read that. If you want extra context on that character in terms of understanding him, read that book. It's really well done. And I think there's a follow-up to that coming out early next year, which I'm very excited for now. And I think because of that novel, I got a lot out of the scene with Thrawn here, because Saxon was very cruel about how he's planning to use the weapon, whereas Thrawn was more like, okay, tactically we'll use it. But the big thing you take away from the Thrawn novel is that he's not a cruel character. You wouldn't even really call him evil. He kind of just ultimately his goals are that he's doing what he's doing ultimately for the sake of his people, the Chiss, and that being loyal to the Empire is kind of how he can help his people ultimately. But there's not this sense of cruelty like some of the other big higher ups within the kind of army. So that was interesting, and I'm interested to see how they play off Thrawn in this season, and what exactly they decide to do with him, and do they incorporate any aspects of the book that were interesting, the Chiss primarily, into this, or not. Also, do they introduce his kind of assistant character, Eli Vanto, who's one of the main characters in that book. Admittedly, the mission he sent him on at the end of that book meant that he probably won't see him unless they have this big, the Chiss are suddenly heavily introduced into the series. But I just like that you saw Thrawn very much focusing more on the tactical aspects of this, and kind of skipping past okay, I get it, you can vaporize people, but you said the range was going to be better on this. The impact that this will have on the people of having their legendary armor be turned into their greatest weakness. That is something that will end the war without even needing to kill people, because just setting an example of a few people would immediately mean that they don't use their armor as effectively, and so on. So, wouldn't say really Thrawn was the focus of this episode, but kind of every scene with Thrawn now has extra context for me because I read that book. So that was a really kind of cool thing, that wow, imagine that, giving a full origin story to a character and having extra context really adds to the characters, and kind of feel like that would work for a lot of these kind of characters in a way. But yeah, I think that's most of the episode. Obviously there was a lot of action stuff going on. I think there was a few moments in the action where it was just kind of like, I get it's for kids, but like that makes no sense. Like, what was it? Ezra was flying in the jetpack and basically flies directly into the windscreen of a TIE fighter, and he's just fine. He's just a little bit hit by it. Like, the speed that the ships, I suppose, are meant to be going at, and the speed that he was going, like, that should have been like this, killing blow, basically. But, I get that they just want to do stuff, and you can't really take the physics of everything so seriously because it's Star Wars, but some of these moments were a little bit like, what are you doing there? Similarly, I think the scene of like Kanan just jumping up and like hopping around on like jetpacks, people with jetpacks backs, was a little like, I get the Jedi can do that sort of thing, but that was a bit like casual how he did that. But the action, as I said, overall was quite solid, and I did enjoy the episode overall. They continue to allude to something between Ezra and Sabine. I don't know if it's just that they're trying to establish their friendship and closeness here, but there was a few moments where it was just kind of like there was a like look for a little longer than usual, and we know that like Ezra likes Sabine, but we don't really know exactly how Sabine sees Ezra, so I don't really know if they'll commit to anything with regards to that relationship. The other thing was that there was one scene with Kanan and Hera, which Kanan very kind of heavily alluded to like their relationship and kind of wanting to talk about it, but Hera was a bit like, what is that what we were talking about? So I appreciate that they're finally like really talking about their relationship, and that was one of the things from the trailer for this season that I was actually quite impressed with, was that like it seems like at some stage this season we're probably going to get the nature of their relationship addressed, and maybe actually transition that into being like a full-on romance, which I think the series kind of needs a little bit of that, and they seem like the best couple with the most development, so why not do it with those two? But yeah, very focused start with the Mandalore stuff. I don't think we saw like characters like Zeb in this episode, so interesting to see where we go. I think we have the names for like the first group of episodes before it goes on its like mid-season break. So like we're only getting like 5 weeks of episodes basically here, because they're doing it 2 at a time, which I think is ultimately going to help, because I think that the last thing in the last season that they needed to do was to really slow this down, because I think if we had to wait between episodes, it would have made episode 2 not very impactful because of the way they did the cliffhanger for part 1. So I think that's ultimately going to work quite well, because usually with Rebels it's very loaded on the second half of the season, so I'm hoping there's still big things in the first half, but you sort of know they're keeping the really big stuff for the second half. With regards to this being the last season, and probably realistically having to kill off a decent amount of our main cast just to make things fit, in that we've got 2 Jedi alive, and we're getting into the time period where Luke's going to be coming into play soon, and Ezra and Kanan can't be there at that time because it's meant to just be like Obi-Wan, Yoda, and Luke, basically. So something's going to have to happen with those. Mandalore isn't really mentioned at any point after this, so potentially something big's going to happen with Mandalore again, which could lead to like Sabine being killed at some point. We know Hera survives, which leaves obviously Zeb. Will he survive or not? Chopper. It's going to be interesting to see how they decide to do that. Do they end this, ultimately like kids show on a really down note of like the death of a lot of characters, kind of like a Rogue One, or do they kind of give you hope and maybe change some of the stuff, like no, Ezra survives because he's not technically a Jedi at the end, or what? But yeah, that's my review for the premiere for this season of Rebels. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on these 2 episodes, as well as what I had to say about them. But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.